"Turn off the light. Noah won't be home tonight." I froze behind the half-closed door when I saw my son's fiancée standing between my husband's legs, his hands wrapped tightly around her waist. My throat closed up, my heart pounding so hard it felt like it might tear through my chest. I stood still like a trespasser in my own home. Then I pulled out my phone and hit record. Just as I was about to burst in, I saw Noah, my son, standing at the end of the hallway, his face calm in a way that chilled me to the bone. He whispered, "Mom, I already know, and what I found out is far worse than anything you could imagine." If you're still listening, tell me where you're watching from. Every comment you leave is another mark in this journey. And if this story has touched you, don't forget to hit like so it can reach even further. I'm Marion Whitaker, 66 years old, owner of the Blue Ridge Hearth Inn, a small inn tucked against a pine forest on the edge of Asheville, North Carolina. People say this place smells like cinnamon and pine every morning, warm like its name, Hearth. With these hands, I scrubbed the red bricks, hand-sewed every curtain, and hung deep red geranium baskets along the balcony. That morning, I woke while the fog was still low. The oven was just hot enough for a batch of buttermilk waffles, and the coffee dark roast from a small roastery on Haywood Street was dripping steadily into the pot. My routine rarely changes: proof the dough the night before, roll it out in the morning, and turn on the local radio about mountain weather. I've always believed small habits keep you steady. Life in your later years needs that kind of discipline. Gerald, my husband of 43 years, usually gets up early to help me set out trays and check the hot water lines. This morning he vanished, leaving a hurried note, down to the basement to check the pipes, heard a hiss. Don't worry. In a century-old house like this, hisses and little clicks in the pipes are normal. They're like the size of old wood. I didn't question it. I dusted sugar over the waffles, opened the kitchen window to let in the mountain mist, and glanced at the wall clock, 6:15 a.m. Tessa, my son, Noah's fiancée, said last night she'd sleep in the main house so she could try on her wedding dress with a local seamstress at the morning. She said the natural light in the living room is better than a studio. I agreed. Noah was staying at his apartment near the new brewery, convenient for work and to keep things traditional before the wedding. I had carefully pressed an ivory silk robe and had Tessa embroidered on the cuff as a welcome gift for my future daughter-in-law. The coffee was steaming, and guests in the first 3 rooms had requested breakfast at 7 a.m. I carried a fruit tray, planning to walk down the hall to the big fridge near the living room. And that's when a thread-thin whisper drifted out from the half-open door. Not the radio, not wood ticking, a voice soft, low, and intimate in the way I'd heard all my life with my husband. My hand paused on the knob, the other hand tugging at my apron. I didn't knock. A woman's intuition, or maybe basic self-preservation, kept me still. I leaned in. Just a narrow strip of light, but enough. Gerald sat on the edge of the living room settee, the blue shirt I had just ironed 2 days ago unbuttoned to the 3rd button. Tessa stood between his legs, hair loosely tied. The silk robe I'd given her, yes, that one parted just enough for Gerald's hand to rest on her waist. It was too clear to fool myself with any other words. I heard Tessa's breath-soft voice, "Turn off the lights. Noah won't be home tonight." Hearing my son's name in that scene hit me in the chest like a hammer. In one heartbeat, my whole life, 3 decades at the stove, our first winter after buying this place, the nights counting every saved dollar turned into the backdrop for a cruel joke. I didn't scream. I didn't shove the door. I didn't scratch or grab something to throw. I pulled out my phone, hit record, my palm cold like it had touched ice water. Partly instinct to preserve evidence, partly because I knew my shouting would only blow apart the hearth I had spent years tending. I backed away, placing each step like a thief in my own home, afraid even a small cough would shatter the mask being worn in there. As I turned, I saw a figure at the end of the hall, tall, lean, shoulders drooping like he'd been carrying something too heavy. Noah. My son's face was paper pale, but his eyes were strangely calm, the kind of calm you have after you walk through the storm first and come back to guide someone else. He didn't touch me, he just raised 2 fingers, a small shh gesture, and tilted his head toward the back door. I nodded, mouth dry, legs shaking so much I had to brace against the darkened timber wall. We passed the row of family photos, Christmas at the ski lot, Grandpa's birthday, Noah in his cap and gown moments that were once warm, now looked like shattered glass. The back porch met us with the smell of pine resin, birds in the woods, and the neighbor's mower far off. I gripped the wooden arm of the chair, waiting for my hands to stop shaking. "How long?" I asked, my voice so hoarse I barely recognized it. 3 months, Noah said, swallowing something like a stone stuck in his throat. He didn't look at me, he looked past my shoulder, to the blue-green ridges in the distance, like his next words needed the whole Blue Ridge to hold them up. "And there's worse." I waited. There are moments when you know you're standing at a cliff edge, and what you're about to hear decides whether you fall or fly. "I didn't want you to find out like this," Noah said, his calm voice running over a fierce current. "I tried to keep things steady for you. But—" He stopped, reached into his jacket, and pulled out a thick envelope. Inside were screenshots, emails, and a few powers of attorney signed Marion E. Whitaker, my name but not my hand, like someone had learned to write my name almost perfectly, except for one tiny mistake only I'd know, the one in Marion I always hook it, a habit from high anim school. On those papers it was a straight, nail-like line. I felt the blood drain from my face. "Gerald set up an LLC called Whitaker Hearth LLC 2 years ago," Noah said, voice flat like reading test results. "Then used those powers of attorney to transfer pieces of the inn's interests into it. Tessa, did you know she used to work for Summit Vista Holdings? They scoop up historic homes and turn them into boutique resorts." A dizzy wave made the scene tilt for a second. The wooden chairs, the wind chime, the freshly watered geraniums all snapped back into place. My trust didn't. "Why?" I asked the dumbest and truest question of my life. "For money?" Noah pressed his lips together. "To sell, Mom. To sell the Hearth Inn. Prices are up because of the new road. Summit Vista floated a strategic partnership. We keep a minority stake, they take operations, then in a few years they swallow it all." He exhaled. I ended it with Tessa in my head the moment I knew. "But I didn't want you shattered. I thought waiting until after the wedding would keep things quieter. Then I gathered proof, found an attorney. I wanted to protect you first." I looked at my hands. Knuckles thin, callous at the base of my thumb from years with a wooden spoon, sunspots from watering plants. These hands built a place called Hearth. I set them on the chair's arm, letting the cool wood pull me out of the shock. "What do we do?" I asked, then remembered this was only the start of the storm. "I've reached Avery Chen," Noah said, "an attorney who does real estate and signature fraud. We can meet today. But Mom—" He paused, and for the first time his steady eyes wavered. "Can you handle it? You'll have to act like you don't know bias time. You'll have to look at them and say nothing." I took a deep breath. The briny pine and coffee in my mouth held me steady. From the back porch I could see into the living room, where the first light painted a gold stripe across the patterned rug I found at a flea market 10 years ago. I heard cups clink on a tray, probably Gerald pouring coffee. I heard Tessa's small laugh, the one I used to think was a shy girl's. Every familiar sound warped like a dream heard through water. "I've kept this hearth burning for 40 years, I said, surprised my voice was as solid as the wood under my hand. "I can stand a few more days, to save it." I lifted my chin and met my son's eyes. "From now on, not one brick of the Hearth Inn ends up in their hands." Noah nodded, that calm settling back on him like a coat he puts on to shield me. Then I'll call Avery. I'll get the files ready. And, he lowered his voice. Mom, don't be alone with them unless you have to. I'll be around. I stood, smoothed my apron, and straightened my hair clip. I looked at my brown leather flats, worn at the outer heel habit of a kitchen worker who moves fast. Let's go, I said. Guests will be down for breakfast. The hearth still has to burn. I walked back in and opened the door wide like it had never been closed. The smell of coffee and buttered sugar greeted me like any morning. The only difference was my heart knew. And as I set the fruit platter on the counter and heard Gerald's steps on the stairs, I understood the last peaceful morning of my life had just ended quietly, like a flame shifting color before it flares. Noah didn't say anything else out on the porch. He motioned for me to follow, down the hall, and opened the small office at the end. I rarely went in there. Gerald used to say it was Noah's space for grad school papers. Later, my son kept the habit of locking the metal file cabinet and never letting me touch it. Today, that door opened, and I realized my child had been preparing something much bigger than I imagined. The room was dim bright with early sun through burlap curtains. Old wood and printer paper smell tightened my chest because I knew I was about to face the truth. Noah knelt and turned the dial on a black safe against the wall. Metal clicks echoed in the quiet, and my insides clenched. A few seconds later, the door swung open. Noah pulled out a thick, worn-edged envelope and set it in front of me, sliding it over like a ritual of handing over evidence. I dragged a wooden chair closer and, hands shaking, opened it. Out fell pages, message screenshots, credit card statements, printed emails. In a few photos I saw Gerald's number on the screen, with syrupy text to Tessa. Miss you tonight. Room 307 is set. I read and felt my heart sink beat by beat. Those locations were all local hotels, places Gerald told me he had to stop by to meet a table linen supplier or look at lumber for repairs. Everyone lined up with times he was gone, leaving me alone with the hearth. I found this 3 months ago, Noah said quietly, eyes on the desk, voice even like he was trying to keep me from collapsing. At first I thought it was dumb flirting, but when the hotel bookings matched Dad's trips, I couldn't deny it. I folded my fingers, nails biting my palms to stop the shaking. Did you say anything to Tessa? I tried to keep my voice steady, though my chest hurt. Noah nodded. I confronted her. At first she denied it, said I was paranoid. When I showed her the photos, she changed tone right away. She said, I didn't need to be miserable, that it could be a 3-way arrangement if I played along. He let out a harsh, metal-on-metal laugh. I walked out. From that day, I knew this wedding was a con. I opened my mouth, but my throat closed. In the stack, I suddenly saw a few legal authorizations. At the bottom, Marion E. Whitaker sat clear and bold. My hand jerked, my heart felt squeezed. The writing looked so real I touched it to be sure it wasn't mine, but I saw the tell. In Marion has always had a soft hook. Here it was a stiff, flat line. I looked up, gasping. They forged my signature. Noah nodded, anger flashing. I think Dad's been doing this for a while. He set up a company called Whitaker Hearth LLC 2 years back. Since then, he's been quietly shifting assets from the inn into it, using those forged authorizations to paper it over. My ears rang. The familiar wood walls felt like they were closing in. I whispered, So, it's not just an affair? No, Mom, Noah said, voice hardening. Tessa isn't the sweet girl you thought. Before coming to the U.S., she worked for Summit Vista Holdings, a company that scoops up heritage buildings and turns them into luxury resorts. To them, the Blue Ridge Hearth Inn is just a rare commodity. Prime location, historic architecture, values soaring. Tessa was sent here, and Dad went along. A cold line ran down my spine. In my head flickered the porch where I embroidered pillows, the stone steps Gerald and I chipped out years ago, the white rose garden I tend every spring. All of it bait for someone else to price, weigh, and sell off. I looked at my son. So, their plan? The wedding? Just to legitimize it? Noah gripped the desk edge, pain and anger lighting his eyes. Exactly. The ceremony is just theater. After the wedding, they'd have a legal path to control everything, then sell it all. And after that, he paused, lips tight. They'd disappear, Mom. Disappear with everything we spent a lifetime building. I couldn't say another word. In that moment, I knew the thin piece I'd clung to for decades had cracked for good. Every memory, every drop of sweat, every year Gerald and I stacked to build this home was being haggled over on a stranger's table. I put my hands on the stack of papers and looked straight at Noah. Well then, son, if they've scripted our lives, it's our turn to rewrite the ending. I bent down, hands trembling slightly as I turned each page in the file Noah had prepared. On the cover, the bold line read, "Strategic Partnership Proposal." It sounded flashy, but a few lines in and I knew this wasn't partnership, it was a disguised takeover. People say dry documents never lie, and when they're right in front of you, they feel like an indictment. They planned to turn my home, the Blue Ridge Hearth Inn, into a premium travel product, a cold phrase with no heart in it. I thought about the last few years, how the land around Asheville heated up day by day. The new road made it easier for tourists from Atlanta and Charlotte to get here, and bit by bit the area became a favorite for deep-pocketed buyers, snapping up old houses and small hotels to flip into resorts. I used to be proud that our little Hearth Inn kept its original warmth, so different from the glossy hotels springing up nearby. Now it turns out that very authenticity made it a rare commodity. They looked and saw profit. I looked and saw a lifetime of memories. Gerald's words echoed in my head those times he sat on the porch with a beer and blurted, "Wish we could just sell it all. Head to Florida, buy a house on the beach. No worries, just sun and waves." I laughed back then, thinking he was joking, because for 40 years he seemed tied to these mountains. Turns out it wasn't idle talk. It was a real dream, and Tessa turned it into a lever. My throat went dry as I wondered when the man I trusted became someone who could betray so easily. Noah sat across from me, eyes sad but steady. He started from the beginning, wanting me to see it clearly. Tessa didn't just happen into his life. In the culinary class at Biltmore, she approached him first, made friends first, and slowly slid into every corner of Noah's life. "Do you remember the first time I brought Tessa home?" She went on about loving old houses and family dinners by the fire, Noah asked. And I remembered. I'd been happy then, thinking my son had found a soulful girl who valued tradition. Now I know those were rehearsed lines meant to soften me up. The more I listened, the clearer it felt like a pre-written play. Love at first glance in class, a quick engagement, then Gerald and Tessa handling paperwork, and finally selling Hearth Inn to Summit Vista Holdings. Each step locked into the next with a cold precision. A shiver ran through me. What was my role? The gentle, blind mother who'd nod on the wedding day, smile for photos, then get quietly pushed out of the home she built. It was all scripted, just waiting for me to hit my marks. Noah lowered his head, voice tight but firm. "I decided a while ago I'm not marrying Tessa. I didn't say it yet because I wanted you safe first. If I broke it off suddenly, she and Dad would know something's up and might do something reckless." I looked at my son and saw both the child I once lulled to sleep by the fire and the man ready to carry the weight to protect his mother. My nose stung. I set my hand on the table and drew a deep breath. "Noah, I won't let anyone take even a single brick from Hearth Inn. This is our home, our blood, our tears, all the years we've poured into it. If they want to steal it, they'll have to get through me first." The words came out like a vow. I never imagined I'd face my husband and future daughter-in-law as enemies, but I'd never felt a fire this strong inside me either. We sat for hours in that small office, the wall clock ticking between each sentence. In the end, we made a decision: find an independent attorney with no ties to Gerald or anyone around here. And do it quietly, step by solid step, without tipping our hand. One small mistake and they'd get suspicious and speed things up. I pulled an old notebook from the drawer. From that day, I started logging everything: dates, times, the tiniest details when Gerald was gone, who Tessa called, things they said when they thought I couldn't hear. I wrote like a witness in my own home, building a file no one could deny. My pen sometimes shook, but line by line the writing sharpened, like carving into stone. Every time I closed the notebook, I looked around the room. The hand-built shelves, the fireplace where generations of guests had gathered, the windows opening onto the garden I've tended plant by plant, all of it seemed to whisper, "Don't let us disappear." And I promised myself Noah and our family's past, this is a fight I am not allowed to lose. We met attorney Avery Chen in a small office downtown, on the second floor of a red brick building more than half a century old. Sunlight poured through a big window, but inside it was calm and almost solemn, just the sound of pages turning and a pen sliding over old wood. Avery, an Asian American man in his 40s, had sharp eyes and a steady voice. I'd heard he specialized in real estate and signature fraud, that's why Noah had booked him. He listened without interruption, nodding or jotting notes now and then. He examined every document from Noah, lingering long over the signatures with my name. When everything lay in a neat stack, he looked up at me and said firmly, "Mrs. Whitaker, this shows clear signs of forgery, fraud, and unlawful asset transfer. This isn't just a family dispute. It's criminal behavior." The words cut like a blade, painful but also a relief. Finally, someone saw and named what Gerald and Tessa were doing. I didn't have to doubt myself anymore. Avery continued, "The best plan now is to file a civil action at the county court and request an emergency order to freeze all transactions tied to the Blue Ridge Hearth Inn. If granted, no one can transfer, sell, or mortgage the property until the court rules." Noah exhaled, and my heart pounded. I asked, "How soon would that order take effect?" Avery said, "If we prep the evidence, a few days. Meanwhile, I'll notify local banks and the county recorder to flag any suspicious activity. That way we lock the front door and bolt the side ones." I clenched both hands in my lap. Gerald wouldn't take it well if all his exits got sealed. As if reading my mind, Avery leaned in, voice slow but serious. "You should be prepared. When people sense their plan is threatened, they may try to wipe evidence, burn documents, destroy contracts, or move money fast. It's common in cases like this." A chill ran down my spine. For years I believed we had nothing to hide and this house was the safest place on earth. Now I had to consider my husband might turn into the one to destroy it all with fire or worse. I glanced at Noah and saw his brow pinched with worry. I drew a long breath and said clearly, "If we want to protect Hearth Inn, we have to act normal. I'll keep cooking breakfast, greeting guests, smiling like always. The more they believe I don't know, the more time we get." Noah turned to me, voice nearly breaking. "Are you sure you can handle that?" "Seeing them every day, pretending in front of the man who betrayed you, I'm afraid it'll wear you down." I took my work-roughened hand and set it over his, strong but tired. "Noah," I whispered, "I built this place with these hands. The walls, the bricks, the boards, my sweat is in them. If I have to pretend a few more days to save it, I can. This isn't the first time I've been patient to protect our family." Pride and hurt flashed in Noah's eyes. He nodded, then looked at Avery. "Only the three of us know everything. No one else. We want to keep the circle tight." Avery nodded. "Good. The fewer who know, the safer. I'll handle all filings myself. In parallel, I'll contact Lieutenant Mateo Ramirez at the police department." When the threshold is met, they'll open a formal criminal investigation. For now, we keep it quiet. Hearing Ramirez's name reminded me of Tandid. Seeing him at community events, a tall Mexican-American man with a steady, serious gaze. I'd heard he was relentless in property fraud cases. Knowing he'd be in charge made me feel like the law was a shield at my back. We wrapped after more than 2 hours. When we stepped out of Avery's office, Asheville's sky had turned gray, heavy clouds signaling a hard rain. I pulled up my scarf and looked toward the mountains, a strange surge of resolve rising in me. For the first time since I discovered the betrayal, I didn't feel like an abandoned wife or a dismissed mother. I felt like the owner of Hearth Inn and I would fight to keep it. Noah drove home in silence. Only when the inn's familiar roofs came into view did I say softly, "From now on, we're in a big play. Remember, every look, every gesture can be scrutinized. The better we perform, the closer we get to winning." Noah tightened his grip on the wheel, tense but resolute. "You won't be acting alone. I'm here." I looked out the window at the garden I've tended for decades. Beds, trees, grass, everything stood quiet, witnesses to what I was about to defend. A silent vow rose in me. No matter who they are or how slick their plan is, I won't let a single brick of the Blue Ridge Hearth Inn slip from my hands. The next morning I went to the kitchen earlier than usual. The batter I'd mixed the night before just needed the oven's heat to fill the house with that warm scent. I set the table, making each move slow and natural. When Tessa came in, hair a little tousled, I smiled as if I knew nothing. "What bouquet are you thinking for the ceremony? I think peonies would suit you," I said evenly. Tessa flinched for half a second, eyes wide, then snapped back to her cheerful self. She smiled sweetly and started debating between white roses and orchids. I nodded along, pouring milk like a model mother-in-law. Inside, every word felt like a blade. Gerald walked in with his coffee. He made it his old way, extra grounds. Hardly any sugar, filling the kitchen with a bitter, harsh aroma. I watched him stir slowly, eyes dodging mine. I know his tiny habits better than anyone, and that fake, calm routine only made his anxiety show more. I pushed a little further. "While plating pastries," I said casually, "I should probably call the church and postpone the ceremony a bit. My aunt in Boston is in the hospital, and you know she treats Noah like her own. It would be awful if she couldn't be there." Tessa froze for exactly half a second, eyes wide, then nodded quickly. "Oh, I completely understand. Family comes first. We can push it a few weeks, it's fine." Her words were soft, but I saw her fingers clamp the napkin harder than usual. Gerald looked up, flicked a glance toward Noah, like he was testing for a crack. My son kept a calm face, took a bite of pastry, then shifted the topic to new breakfast options for guests. The whole table sat in a silent play, everyone understood. That afternoon, after the guests left to explore, I sat quietly in the office with a thick stack of forms. I started the application to designate the Blue Ridge Hearth Inn as a local historic property. Those dry lines about cultural value and distinctive architecture became the steel deadbolts I set on my home. If approved, any sweeping renovations or demolition plans would be stopped by law. Each sentence I wrote felt like another lock, another shield for the place that's held my life. When I signed my name, my hand was steady in a way it hadn't been for days. Marion E. Whitaker came out clear, no shake, no tilt. For the first time in days, I felt a piece of control return to me. Night fell with a light mist outside. I kept the reading room lamp on, pretending to review bookings. Then a strange whisper pulled me from the desk. I stepped softly onto the back porch, heart pounding. Tessa's voice, low and firm, cut through the dark. "We need to speed it up. The buyer's getting impatient. They want to close soon." That line, "we need to speed it up, the buyer's getting impatient," might sound like business, but in this house it was a knife in a mother's heart. What do you think when greed makes people treat family like merchandise? Leave your thoughts, sometimes. An honest comment is the best comfort for anyone who's been betrayed. I couldn't see who she was talking to, only Tessa's slim frame under the dim yellow light. I stepped back, silent. My heart hammered, but my mind was bright as a lamp. Back in the room, I opened my notebook and wrote down the time, the place, every word Tessa said. Then I snapped a photo and sent it to Avery through an encrypted app. Every line, every bit of data felt like a heavy stone I was adding to the scales of justice. That night, I lay beside Gerald, listening to his steady breathing. Outside, the mountain wind hissed through the window seams with a chill. I stared at the ceiling, feeling tension wrap around me like fog, but instead of fear, I felt a growing resolve. I knew the fight would be long, but step by step, piece by piece, Noah and I would build a wall they couldn't climb to steal our home. Tuesday morning, just after I finished breakfast for a group from Atlanta, a strange black SUV pulled up at the gate. Two men in suits stepped out with briefcases, their faces so confident they bordered on arrogant. I glanced at Gerald. He flinched, then quickly put on a calm face. Tessa stepped off the porch, voice sweet as honey. Right on time. They introduced themselves as representatives of Summit Vista Holdings, the company I'd already heard about from Avery and Noah. One, Barrow, had salt and pepper hair and a practical smile. The other, younger, with a sharp, cold gaze, was named Mendez. They talked about a strategic partnership opportunity, about keeping your family a minority stake for appearances. Each word hit like cold drops of water. It was clear Summit Vista saw Hearth Inn as a parcel to extract value from, and we were just obstacles to clear. I invited them to walk the rose garden out back. The blooms were open, the scent mild in the mountain air. I kept my voice even, telling the story of each stone in the path, even the foundation stone Gerald and I set ourselves in the summer of 1982. I hit every word like a reminder. This place isn't a commodity, it's part of my family's body. Back at the front porch, I stopped, turned to the two men, and said lightly but firmly, "My home is not for sale." It wasn't loud, but in the quiet it rang like a bell. Gerald, beside me, slid his gaze away and suddenly got busy adjusting his cuff. Tessa laughed and tried a joke. "Oh, Mom just talks tough. We all want what's best for the inn." But Noah stepped forward, standing behind me like a steady shadow, his eyes locked on Barrow and Mendez without a flicker. Barrow set his briefcase on the porch table and pulled out a thick stack of papers. "We understand the emotional attachment, but please take a look. This is just a draft MOU, a memorandum of understanding. You and your family will keep your name on the sign, but the management terms will transfer to us. That's how Hearth Inn can grow." I took the stack, flipped a few pages, and saw the cold phrases clearly. Transfer of operating control, full financial authorization. I set the papers down, looked straight at Gerald, and asked one question. "Who currently has signing authority?" The whole porch fell silent. Gerald froze, his eyes darting like he was searching for an exit. His lips moved, but nothing came out. Tessa shot him a look, clearly waiting for him to speak. But Noah answered firmly instead, calm but ringing clear. "The legal owners and signatories are Marion Whitaker and Noah Whitaker." He said each word precisely, as if drawing a line that could not be crossed. The air seemed to harden. Mendez gave a small cough. Barrow awkwardly closed the file. They looked at each other, then at Gerald, hoping for a different response. Nothing but silence. Finally, Barrow forced a smile and said, "We understand perhaps this isn't the right time. We'll be in touch." They pulled back, obviously flustered. The SUV engine roared to life and rolled slowly down the dirt road. I stood there watching, saying nothing. Beside me, Noah stood straight, like a soldier who'd just won a small battle. Tessa was different. Her face was tight, one corner of her mouth curled up, but her eyes were on fire. As soon as they left, she yanked out her phone, thumbs flying at a frantic speed. I knew those messages weren't about coffee dates. Gerald came closer, trying to play it cool. It's just negotiation, Marion. People always push for more, but it doesn't mean we're agreeing to anything. I looked at him without replying, and I could see the strain under the mask. That night, I sat alone in the office, the desk lamp shining on a notebook already thick with pages of notes. I wrote down the time, detailed the meeting, the looks, the gestures, and especially Gerald and Tessa's reactions. Then I sent an encrypted report to Avery. When I hit send, my heart felt heavy but steady. I knew after failing at my doorstep, they wouldn't take the straightforward route again. Tessa's whisper from the porch the night before kept echoing, "Speed it up, the buyer's getting impatient." I understood the next step would be the shortcut, and that meant this fight was about to get harsher than ever. That afternoon, my phone buzzed. Avery Chen's name lit the screen. I stepped onto the back porch where the breeze moved through the rose bushes and answered. His voice was calm but urgent. "Mrs. Whitaker, the court granted the emergency order. From now on, all transactions involving Blue Ridge Hearth Inn are frozen. No bank or title office will process a transfer until the case is heard." I closed my eyes and felt like an invisible shield had just risen around the house, but Avery didn't let me relax long. It also means they'll try something else. I forwarded the full file to Lieutenant Ramirez. He'll run discreet surveillance around the property to catch any moves. That night, after Noah fell asleep, I went back through my notes alone. Blue ink lines stacked with dates, times, each slip of Tessa's tongue every time Gerald disappeared. Suddenly, a new notification popped up in the secure inbox I shared with Avery. A bank statement. Withdrawals from the Whitaker Hearth LLC account the shell Gerald set up 2 years ago were being routed through a middle wallet and scattered to multiple places. I watched thousands of dollars vanish with each transaction. My hands shook, but my eyes sharpened. This wasn't personal anymore. It was proof of active laundering, clear and undeniable. The next morning, I ran into Tessa in the lobby. She was labeling 2 shiny, fancy new suitcases. When she saw me, she smiled sweetly. "I bought these for the honeymoon, but I'll probably use them for a work trip first." I just nodded, holding back questions. I was used to her double-meaning lines. That afternoon, Gerald walked into the kitchen while I was washing vegetables. He hesitated, then smiled, trying to sound casual. "Marion, it's been a while since we had a dinner out. How about tonight? Just us, like before." I turned and saw something odd in his eyes, part probing, part pleading, and part hiding. I nodded, my voice light as air. "All right." Inside, I knew. My performance was beginning. Near dusk, I went to change. I chose the dark blue dress Gerald once praised at an anniversary party, the color hugging my figure just enough the image of the wife he used to be proud to hold hands with. In the mirror, my eyes weren't the same anymore. Hurt, but also resolute, I whispered. "End it tonight, Marion. This is the last round." The plan with Noah was set. I'd leave with Gerald for dinner. But first I'd forget my purse on the table. When I went back to get it, I'd tip off Noah. He would hide in the office and turn on the new covert cameras. If Gerald and Tessa thought we were gone and rushed to haul documents, move the safe, or grab jewelry, every move would be recorded. Caught in the act, evidence stronger than any statement. I stepped into the hall and heard Noah's steps upstairs. He looked at me, worry in his eyes but steel in his stance. I leaned in and murmured, "I'm not afraid, son. We finish this." He squeezed my hand hard, then disappeared into the dark office. Before leaving, I peeked through the window. Tessa sat on the porch, texting nonstop. Her blonde hair fell forward, her face tilted down, but I knew she was talking to someone about timelines. I turned away, keeping my face calm. As Gerald drove off the lane onto the main road, I leaned back, eyes forward. Heavy dark clouds stacked over the Blue Ridge like slabs of lead. Cold air slid through the window crack, carrying a raw dampness. A storm was coming. I had one inside me too, but it wasn't fear. It was the storm of waiting. Tonight, every mask would fall. And my house, the one I built with my whole life, would be defended by truth laid bare. La Montagne sat on a quiet street a few miles from the inn. Candlelight flickered across the table, catching the crystal glasses and warming the white linen. Gerald sat across from me, suit neat, wine-colored tie. He tried to be gallant, poured the wine, and raised his glass. "Marion, you're as beautiful as ever. I'm lucky to have a wife like you." I lifted my glass, offered a small smile, but my eyes didn't waver. I set it down, leaned in, and kept my voice low, just for us. "I know everything. The flight to Miami connecting to the Bahamas, and the shell account. Under that LLC." Gerald went still. In the candlelight, his face drained white, eyes wide like someone had ripped off a familiar mask. His hand shook around the glass. "Marion, you're misunderstanding. I'll give you a fair share. We can split it. I wasn't going to leave you." I sat straight and answered evenly. "Gerald, I'm not asking for a share of a house I built with my own hands. Blue Ridge Hearth Inn isn't yours alone, and it's not a bargaining chip." My voice was firm, each word landing like a hammer on wood. The air thickened. Gerald inhaled, eyes flashing, then ducked behind a forced smile. "You don't understand. This is an opportunity. We'll be richer than ever." His line cut off when my phone buzzed in my pocket. "Noah," I answered. His voice was a tight whisper. "Mom, they're gathering files and jewelry. Avery called the police. Ramirez and the team will be there in a few minutes." I pushed back my chair. It scraped loud against the floor. Gerald panicked. "Where are you going?" I looked him in the eye. "I have to go home." He reached out, frantic. "Marion, wait. No need to blow this up. Sit down and let me explain." I brushed his hand aside and headed for the door. I knew the thing Gerald feared most wasn't losing assets, it was me seeing, with my own eyes, what was happening in my house. We got in the car. Gerald gripped the wheel, his hands white-knuckled, veins raised. He stomped the gas. The car shot along the mountain road. Wind whistled through the crack, hot asphalt smell rising thick. I stared out the window as trees blurred backward, the rare streetlight flaring and vanishing like a slow-motion reel. I wondered how many homes across this country hold secrets no one dares say out loud. How many wives, how many mothers have sat in a car like me, knowing the betrayal, staying steady while waiting for the truth to surface. Gerald drove faster, sweat beading on his forehead. I could see panic swallowing him. He knew tonight was the turn his game had spun out of control. He exhaled and almost begged, "Marion, I just wanted a new start. You have to believe me." I didn't answer. I stared straight ahead, and then as we turned into the inn's entrance, red and blue lights flashed across the front lot. Patrol cars were already there, lights strobing over brick and wooden fence. In that moment, I knew. Everything Noah and I had prepared for was bearing fruit. The truth was about to hit the table like face-up cards. And Gerald, the man who once laid the inn's bricks with me, would have to face it. No way out. The car shot through the last curve back to the inn, and the red and blue had already washed the whole yard. The flashing lights stuttered across the wood siding, the house walls, the tall pines, and the stone plaque where Gerald and I carved our names over 40 years ago. Mountain wind carried heavy damp and a distant growl of thunder. The porch I knew so well now looked like a stage where the final act was dropping. I gripped my bag strap, stepped out, and the wind whipped my dress around my legs. Wet earth, pine resin, and the metallic smell of police cars mixed into the thick scent of endings. Right on the steps, Tessa was in cuffs. Her pale wrists jerked against bright metal, shoulders shaking. She shrieked, voice sharp. "You've got it wrong. I didn't do anything. I just—" A clean, cold click of a weapon behind her cut the line short. Tessa's eyes darted wild. On the porch floor, her fancy leather suitcase lay open. My jewelry pouch, neatly folded documents, and a silver USB stick catching flashlight beams. Next to her, two unfamiliar men were pinned over their SUV's hood. One, bald with a faded tattoo, growled, "I'm just the guy they hired to haul stuff." The other, hair slicked with sweat, couldn't speak. His face was a blur of fear and defeat. Lieutenant Mateo Ramirez stood square on the porch, tall and broad-shouldered, uniform damp with rain. His voice carried through the storm, clipped and clear. "You are under arrest for possession of stolen property and conspiracy to defraud. You have the right to remain silent. Anything you say can be used against you in court," he signaled. And a young officer in white gloves held up a sealed leather pouch. I recognized it instantly, my chest clenched. Inside, the emerald earrings my mother gave me when I turned 21, the pearl necklace Gerald bought in New York for our 20th anniversary, and the diamond ring I'd kept in the safe since the day Noah was born. Now they were evidence pieces of my life taken and returned in shame. Ramirez lifted another envelope and opened it for me to see. Inside were the USB and copies of transfer papers. "We recovered the code you sent," he said. "These are the forged signatures, the management transfer contracts, and the money moved from the LLC account to a middle wallet. There's no denying it." I looked to Noah. He stood under the porch, hair wet with rain, jacket dusty with wood flecks. His eyes shone in that chaos, relieved and hurting at once. When I stepped over, he wrapped an arm around my shoulders and whispered, "You're here. Everything happened exactly like you said. The police got here in time." I nodded, my throat tight. All the fear, the anger, and the hope I'd held for months broke open, but not the way I'd imagined. No screaming, no tears. Only a deep quiet like a lake after a storm, when everything sinks to the bottom. Behind us, Gerald stepped out of the porch shadows. Red and blue strobes washed his face bone pale. He moved slowly, eyes searching, then stopped in front of me. His voice cracked. "Marion, you have to hear me out. This is all a misunderstanding. I wasn't trying to hurt you." I looked at him for a long time. So many years breakfasts with laughter, Christmas lights, nights by the fire, listening to rain. Now all I saw was a small, shaking stranger. I spoke softly, each word heavy as stone. "This is my house. No one has the right to take it, least of all the person who built it with me." Ramirez stepped forward and motioned to two officers. He said simply, "Arrest the suspect, Gerald Whitaker, as an accomplice in property fraud." Gerald's hands were pulled behind him. The clink of handcuffs rang bright in the night. He lifted his head, eyes locked on me, no trace of the old confidence, only a flash of fear and too late regret. "Marion," his voice broke, "I never wanted it to end like this." I didn't answer. Words meant nothing now. Some betrayals can't be patched with apologies. I watched as they led him to the car, and the metal door slammed, one hard thud sealing a life we'd shared that had rotted long ago. As the car rolled out of the yard, I stood under the pine porch. Rain thickened, hitting the roof, the steps, and my shoulders. I didn't wipe it away. The cold drops felt like a final washing, rinsing off the grime of the years I'd been deceived. Noah came close and set his jacket over my shoulders. I felt my son's warmth, the resolve in the way he stood beside me, not the child who once feared thunder, but the man who had walked with me through the biggest fight of our lives. I squeezed his hand and whispered, "It's over now, Noah." He nodded, eyes fixed on the pines. The tall trunks stood firm in the rain, branches swaying in the wind, their rustling steady like a farewell song for a marriage that had just ended. In that moment, I felt they were speaking for me. It was time to close the door. Lieutenant Ramirez turned back, his voice low but kind. "Mrs. Whitaker, I'll be honest, very few people stay as composed as you did. In most cases, folks either fall apart or let their emotions wreck the plan. You saved yourself and your property." I gave a small smile, my breath fading into the damp air. "I only did what I had to do to protect this house," I said. "My house and my son's." Ramirez nodded, gave me a brief farewell, and walked off, his shoes printing the wet ground. The police cars left one by one, until only the porch light's pale glow and the steady rain remained. I stood there a long time, looking at my house in the dark. The wooden frames, the steps, the old roof, everything was still there, still solid, like my own heart after all the storms. I realized I didn't need to collapse to be pitied. Sometimes silence and resolve are the only answers a betrayer deserves. A final gust blew through, carrying the warm resin scent of pine, like the old season saying goodbye. I lifted my head, drew a deep breath, then gently closed the porch door, my chest lighter than it had been in years. The next morning, Asheville seemed to wake up to my news. The Asheville Daily Chronicle ran a bold headline: "The Blue Ridge Hearth Case, a shock in the heart of a historic town." Just below was the familiar photo, the front of my house in stormlight and police flashers. A small caption read, "A small but complex property fraud investigation tangled with family, corporate ties, and trust." I sat in the living room, coffee cooling in my hand. Noah set the paper on the table and said carefully, "Did you ever think you'd be on the front page, Mom?" I shook my head with a tired smile. "No, but at least the truth has a name." In the weeks that followed, the truth peeled back in layers. Piece by piece, the picture came into the light. Police released preliminary findings. Tessa Miller, her real name, had been a mid-level employee at Summit Vista Holdings, tasked with scouting and persuading owners of promising properties. In old files, there was even a photo of her at a project launch in Denver, beaming as she shook hands with one of the company's vice presidents. The two men arrested that night confessed as well. They'd been hired to clear out documents and jewelry for a few $1,000s in cash. "We just did what we were told," one statement read. "We heard the place was about to be handed over to a new owner, so it had to be cleared fast." I reread that line in the report, my hand tightening. Handed over to a new owner. They said it like an auction lot, not the home I'd built with my youth. Gerald was held for a few days, then released on bond awaiting trial. On the first court day, he walked in with his head down, gaunt face, stubble, eyes empty. I sat in the back row among a thicket of cameras and reporters. As the prosecutor read the charges: fraud, forgery, and aiding in unlawful transfer of assets, my heartbeat slowed. Gerald's lawyer cited a late-life crisis, said he was lost after retirement, and that Tessa exploited the emotions of a man searching for meaning. I looked down at my hands, not angry, just quietly sad. The man I once loved was being excused with cheap lines. He admitted part of the wrongdoing, hoping for leniency. I didn't look at him again. When the gavel came down, everything between us was truly over. Meanwhile, Avery and his financial team kept tracking the money drained from the Whitaker Hearth LLC account. After weeks, they identified nearly $2 million routed through multiple layers: shell companies, an account in the Caymans, then back to the U.S. Most of it was frozen in time thanks to the emergency court order. Avery filed the very day we set the trap. "If we'd been a night late, they would have moved it all," Avery said, relief and fatigue in his voice. I just answered softly, "It's all right, some of it's gone, but the part that matters most is still here." What mattered most wasn't money, it was the house. The divorce moved quickly. Both sides wanted it done. I signed my name again, steady, not angry, just ready to close the chapter. When the judge read the final clause, "Blue Ridge Hearth Inn is recognized as a county heritage property. Any sale, transfer, mortgage, or restructuring must go through the Heritage Commission and have the consent of the legal owner, Mrs. Marion E. Whitaker. I looked up, feeling as if someone had laid the last brick to rebuild my life's foundation. After court, life slowly found a new rhythm. Noah and I sat in the living room, papers stacked in neat piles. "I think we should reopen Hearth Inn with a more welcoming angle," Noah said. "Not just a place to stay somewhere people can feel the history and hear the stories." I looked out the window, late sunlight over the pine porch, warm as those early years after Gerald and I married. "Hearth Inn has always had a soul," I said. "We just need to light it again." And we did. We reopened after 3 months of touch-ups, no flashy upgrades, no new sign. Just a small board by the door. Blue Ridge Hearth Inn, a place to come home to. Strangely, after all that turmoil, more guests arrived. Some came out of curiosity, but most stayed because they felt something real. They didn't ask me about the scandal. They asked about the stone walkway, the smell of morning waffles, the old fireplace I still light on winter nights. A young reporter came to write a house that survived a con piece. I just smiled. If you write it, write about stubbornness. Write about how a house can stand when the people inside don't fall. Noah and I didn't blast ads. We shared our story with kindness and details. Word spread, and Hearth Inn became a warm stop in the Blue Ridge. One day, I got a letter from the local culinary school. They asked if I'd partner on an internship program, students learning and serving guests. I said yes immediately. Each season, new young faces filled the kitchen, bright with laughter. One afternoon, I watched a brown-haired girl carefully set waffles on a tray. I told her, "Don't be afraid to mess up. Here, everything can be fixed, even small mistakes." She smiled, and I realized I was teaching what I had learned through tears. Perseverance. Hearth Inn settled back into its old rhythm, but it wasn't the same. It wasn't just an inn. It was proof that honesty and grit can survive. Many guests said they felt it as soon as they stepped onto the porch. I believe them. Every plank, every brick, every line in the guest book holds the spirit of what I fought for. Every night, once the house quieted, I walked the pine hallway. Warm yellow light pooled on the ceiling, my shadow stretching long across the old posts. I ran my hand along the wood, feeling each rough grain and hairline crack time left behind. They weren't flaws anymore, they were witnesses of endurance. Softly, almost to myself, I said, "I kept the house. I kept Hearth Inn, kept my honor, kept my peace. I kept my son's trust, the one thing money can never buy back." And when the mountain wind came down through the pines, I heard an answer in their whisper, gentle and steady, "And the house kept you too." That morning, fog draped the Blue Ridge slopes. Early winter air carried the damp scent of earth and fallen leaves, sad and warm at once. I was steeping peach tea when I heard a soft knock, 3 slow taps, hesitant, like the person outside wasn't sure. When I opened the door, a woman stood on the porch, a gray wool coat around a thin frame. She lifted her head, eyes deep and tired, but her voice steady. "Mrs. Whitaker, I'm Elaine Barlow, Tessa's mother." I stood still for a few seconds, then invited her in. No anger, just a distant feeling, like seeing a piece of my past I hadn't closed yet. We sat at the porch table where I'd shared so many mornings of coffee with Gerald. Weak sunlight slipped through the pines, mottling the tabletop. Elaine held the teacup I set down, her hands trembling. "I know I have no standing to be here," she began, "but I need to apologize. I raised a daughter who was too ambitious. When I saw her succeed, I blindly believed any sacrifice was worth it. I didn't see the darkness in her until it was too late." I stayed quiet. Wind moved under the eaves, like the house sighing. Elaine said Tessa had always wanted to be above others. When Summit Vista hired her, Elaine proudly told neighbors her daughter worked for a major company. Then came expensive gifts, unexplained trips, and the growing cold in Tessa's eyes. That's when she understood her daughter had slipped too far. "You can hate me," Elaine said, voice catching, "but I'm not here to excuse her. I'm here because I know a mother's loss. And I want you to know, I never taught her to betray anyone." I exhaled softly. Years of anger and contempt aimed at another woman faded like smoke. I couldn't say I forgave, but I didn't hate anymore. We drank our tea in silence. The peach sweetness and warmth seeped into my chest. We talked about Mother's long winters, the nights waiting for a door that never opened, meals going cold around an empty chair. Elaine looked at me, kind and hurting. "Maybe we're not so different, Marion. The difference is you still have your home. I lost my child." I held her hand gently. Not to erase the past, but to acknowledge that a mother's pain wears the same colors. When Elaine left, I watched her fade into the fog and knew it was a meeting that needed no forgiveness to lighten the heart. In the days after, I noticed Noah smiling more. He talked often with Harper Quinn, a young architectural researcher staying to study historic timber work. Harper's soft brown hair and bright eyes followed a thick notebook everywhere. She spoke with excitement about mortise and tenon joints, about how the hearth-in porch was designed to catch morning sun and shed afternoon rain. I watched them on the porch, Noah leaning in to listen, Harper smiling, her voice moving like music. In the dimming light, they looked like two people rediscovering something lost. My heart, tight for so long, began to unclench. As for me, I relearned how to be alone without feeling empty. I started my journals again, not to complain, but to note small things: the smell of cinnamon toast, the kettle's first bubble, the wind threading through pine needles. Sometimes I sat by the fireplace for hours, writing a short line. "This morning the inn smelled like baked apples. Winter is here." Writing told me I was still living, still breathing with this house. One Saturday night, a folk band asked to play in the backyard. I said yes, only asked them to keep it gentle so guests could rest. But when the mandolin began and hand drums found a beat, people gathered, laughing and tapping their feet. Under the string lights, faces lit up, smiles passing from one to another. I stood on the steps and felt the inn breathe alive. Joyful. After years of strain, I finally felt truly at peace. That night, I called Noah into the office. I opened the old wood cabinet and took out the brass-locked box I call our treasure of keepsakes. Inside were yellowed photos, a silver spoon engraved with my mother's name, a few old letters from Gerald back when he was the man I loved, and the first notebook from when we built the inn. I handed Noah the key. "Not to burden you," I said, slow and sure, "but to root you. If you ever lose your way, open it. Every piece in here is a shard of this house's soul." Noah took it, eyes wet but grateful. "I promise I'll keep it the way you kept Hearth Inn." I smiled. I believed him. Late that night, once everyone slept, I stepped onto the porch again. A low crescent moon hung over the ridge, the wind bringing back the resin scent I knew by heart. I asked myself, if a letter came someday from Gerald, from Tessa, or from the girl I used to be, would I read it? I don't know. Maybe I wouldn't need to. Sometimes healing doesn't come from answers, but from learning to be quiet, to touch the present, and to smile. One early spring morning, dew still heavy on the lawn and daffodils just breaking the ground, the mail carrier handed me a thick envelope. The return corner read clearly, "North Carolina State Prison." My heart dipped. My hand shook as I opened it. Inside was a letter from Gerald. The handwriting, though shaky and slanted, was unmistakable, the same hand that once signed so many inn documents. He began with an apology, no excuses, no defense. He wrote, "Marion, I don't expect forgiveness, only that you read this. I was afraid of getting old, of people seeing me as useless, and I got obsessed with the idea of starting over. Only when I sat in a small cell and stared at a tiny square of sky through bars did I understand what I'd lost wasn't money. It was a home, a family. And you. I read slowly, hearing his old, low voice in my head. He wrote about the emptiness of jail nights, only metal sounds echoing back. He said the hunger to begin again blinded him, and the price was everything real. I sat on the lawn by the porch, the raw green scent of spring grass in the air. I read to the last line, then folded the letter carefully, like a keepsake finally put away. Inside, there was no hate left. Forgiveness, to me, doesn't mean forgetting. It means setting down the burden of anger on the old road and walking forward. I haven't forgotten what Gerald did, but I chose not to carry the rage anymore. On the town's spring market opening day, Noah, Harper, and I set up a small Hearth Inn booth. Harper led a group, telling the story of the roofline and the foundation stone set in 1982. Noah introduced a new menu, pecan pastries and honey peach tea flavors that make people feel welcome. I sat on the porch, watching the crowd flow in, hearing laughter and talk, feeling life return around me. I hung a new wind chime under the eaves. When the spring wind moved through, it rang and mingled with the pine's whisper. It was the sound of each new day, the sound of the freedom I'd fought to keep. That night, the backyard glowed. Guests circled the wood tables, children ran, a folk guitar strummed under a plain, honest voice. I stood in the middle of the yard, filled my lungs with warm pine and wood smoke, and listened to the wind against the porch and the bright bursts of laughter. Peace rose in me rare and full. I understood. The life ahead is mine and belongs to the people I truly love. No more shadows. No more schemes. Only endurance, renewal, and the faith that even after the longest winter, spring returns. And if you, the one listening to my story, have stayed with me to this point, I want to say this from the bottom of my heart. Thank you for sitting by the Hearth Inn fire, for hearing the storms and the calm that followed. May I ask, where are you watching from? A small town in America, or somewhere far away? Leave a comment and tell me what you think about justice and starting over. If you feel a connection, if you want to come back to this hearth each week where I'll keep sharing true stories from the heart, please hit subscribe and leave a like. Your company warms my whole yard and carries this wind chime song a little farther on the breeze. I bow in gratitude. Because of you, this journey isn't lonely anymore.